Vamos a empezar por ver este concepto, pero antes de identificar los usos del pretérito imperfecto al mismo tiempo, quiero empezar por enfocar en el pretérito primero y después el imperfecto. Y aquí tengo una pregunta para empezar con el pretérito. ¿Qué hiciste ayer? Entonces ahora ustedes en sus papeles, en sus apuntes, necesitan responder con 3 actividades específicas, énfasis en específicas, que hicieron ustedes ayer, ¿no? Y aquí tengo un ejemplo. Por la mañana yo trabajé, la forma regular del verbo trabajar. Trabajé. Por la tarde fui a mi casa. El verbo ir, que es irregular en el pretérito. Y por último, el verbo completamente irregular, tener, tuve que corregir unos exámenes. Tenemos esta referencia específica y por eso tenemos que usar el pretérito. Fuimos a clase, trabajamos, hicimos la tarea. En cambio, aquí tenemos otra referencia completamente diferente de niño. Y por eso no podemos usar el pretérito, tenemos el verbo hacías, el imperfecto, ¿no? Porque estamos hablando de actividades habituales o generales o repetidas que hacían ustedes de niños. Entonces, ahora necesitan escribir 3 actividades que hacían de niños. Por ejemplo, yo de niña iba, el verbo ir, que es irregular, iba a la casa de mis abuelos, comía muchos dulces y jugaba al fútbol, ¿no? Entonces ahora escriban 3 actividades que hacían y después en sus grupos van a identificar una actividad que tienen en común y después poner este verbo en la forma de nosotros. El imperfecto se usa para acciones repetidas, ¿no? Vamos a la escuela, acciones repetidas o habituales, y el pretérito se usa para acciones específicas. En la lección 9 estudiamos o repasamos el pretérito y ustedes en la lección 10 enfocamos en el imperfecto. Pero en la lección 10 también usamos el pretérito con el verbo enfermarse. ¿Cómo se dice enfermarse en inglés? To get sick. Excelente. Entonces, una pregunta en el examen de la lección 10, en la parte de escuchar, era ¿cuándo fue la última vez que te enfermaste? Acciones específicas. Me enfermé, ¿no? Ayer, o el año pasado, o en agosto, por ejemplo. Algunas personas dijeron, esta es una referencia específica en agosto, una vez me enfermé. Sin embargo, otra pregunta o otro ejemplo en el examen de la lección 10 y también en la charla o the discussion board in Oaks es ¿con qué frecuencia te enfermabas de niño o de niña? Y me enfermabas. No sé, con frecuencia, frecuentemente, pocas veces. De niña, ¿no? La referencia de niña pocas veces indica una acción Me enfermaba, perdón. Una acción repetida, ¿no? Entonces, en el mismo capítulo, la lección 10, con el mismo verbo enfermarse, tenemos el uso del pretérito y el uso del imperfecto. Ahora, en la lección 11, no vamos a hablar de enfermarse. Ahora, en la lección 11, nosotros vamos a aplicar el tema de la lección 11 y específicamente recibir mi licencia de conducir. Con este contexto, con este momento muy importante en nuestras vidas, vamos a conocer los usos de los dos tiempos, imperfecto y pretérito. Y a propósito, on purpose, les presento este concepto con el contexto de recibir mi licencia de conducir porque nos da mucho sentido. This is a very meaningful moment in our life. This is a milestone for most of us native to U.S. culture. And also, I wanted to make sure that we use lots of new chapter vocab, because on the superset activity, you'll see some chapter vocab. On the test, of course, you're going to see chapter vocab. And if we don't understand the meaning of what's going on, then identifying the grammatical usage of these tenses is going to be quite difficult. So that's why today I wanted to provide a context in which most of us are familiar, getting our driver's license, so that it's meaningful to us, but also so that we can see a lot of these chapter concepts in terms of vocabulary used with this concept, and we can further identify why we're using the preterite and why we're using the imperfect. So here's a story about getting my driver's license, and right now you can do it in groups if you'd like, which is great, or you can do it individually. I want you to go through first and identify the meaning of, just the main idea. Don't translate literally word for word. Do not do that, because that's looking at one specific thing at a time when we really want to focus on the main idea here. So don't worry about translating. Just, go through and make sure everybody's kind of understanding what's going on. And then, as you can see on your papers, all the highlighted verbs are bold-faced verbs. I want you to write the letter P for preterite or the letter I above them, because I want you to identify which tense is being used. And ultimately, maybe on the back where you have this chart where we have the imperfect and the preterite, you could note as to why we're using the imperfect here or why we're using the preterite. But only do that if you feel like you're seeing something consistent and you're able to identify the uses of the verbs, tenses. But just right now, in groups or individually, identify which tense is being used and what's going on in this sentence, okay? So in the introduction, when we're giving background information, we're going to use a lot of the imperfect. But then, what's the next part of a good story? What's that called? We have the introduction and then the body of a story. And in the body of a story, what do? What is the body of the story for? We have the introduction to give background information, and then the body of the story is used for what? Right, the events that took place, the details. And when you look at this story, what tense do we see a lot of? Preterite or imperfect? The preterite, right? Because we use the preterite for specific events, right? Specific events completed in the past, the details of what occurred, etc. So in the body of a story, we're going to see a lot of preterite. And somewhere in the body, right before the conclusion, we have the climax, what happened. And that's also going to be in the preterite tense more often than not. And then we have our conclusion. And you did this on your chapter 10 paragraph. Our conclusion, if you look down at the bottom, what tense do we see a lot of? At the very end of the story, we see a lot of The preterite. And we can describe in our conclusion, so it's not like exclusively always the preterite, but whenever we summarize an event, we're going to use the preterite. So keep this in mind on the super site, and keep this in mind on your chapter test, and apply this when you do your ampliación for chapter 11, because you're going to write a paragraph for chapter 11, and you're going to apply these concepts and organize your ideas in an intro, a body, and a conclusion. So now we're going to go through our story, and we're going to identify what's going on first, and then figure out why we're using the preterite and why we're using the imperfect. Okay, so the sentence starts off with two verbs, tenía and recibí. And tenía is in what tense? Which one? Ia is for ir verbs in the imperfect. And then recibí, though, is the preterite. Right, exactly. What's this saying? Cuando tenía 16 años? When I was 16, right? But we're using the imperfect. Why would we use the imperfect to say how old we were? That seems pretty specific. Actually, the reason why, and in the last class, a couple of students asked me, individually when they were working on this, that this was a contradiction of what we were talking about, because that seems so specific. But we're going to talk about today exceptions to the rule that are going to become very easy to identify on the supersite in the test and even the final exam. And I have like a mnemonic device, an acronym to help you remember this. So I'm going to write this down here. Tenía 16 años is talking about how old we were. And even though that seems very specific, like you could put it on a timeline, we actually use the imperfect for this. So whenever you see the verb tener plus an age, a number with años, you know your answer is going to be a form of tenía. Teníamos, tenían, yo tenía, tú tenías. Tenía plus a number and años is imperfect. So that's an exception to the rule, because even though that seems very specific, it's actually whenever we say how old we were in the past tense, we use tenía. But here, recibí mi licencia is the preterite, because why? What's that saying? I what? Got my driver's license. And that is very specific. More importantly, it's completed one time in the past. It's not a repeated action. Does that make sense? Okay, on el segundo ejemplo, la segunda oración. Durante toda mi adolescencia quería conducir. So what's this saying? What time frame am I talking about? Adolescencia is referring to your adolescence, right? This whole span of time. Quería conducir. What is it saying? I what? Wanted to drive. Right, exactly. So quería is in what tense? Imperfect. Why? Because it's expressing wanting, needing. Those are ongoing actions. It doesn't just happen and is over. And we know from chapter 9, querer in the preterite doesn't even have anything to do with to want. Querer in the preterite with no means refuse to, like Carlitos no quiso comer, or querer without the no, quise or quiso means tried. It has nothing to even do with wanting. So whenever you want to convey the idea of wanting, or even using the verb necesitar, necesitaba, I needed to do something, or I was wanting to do something, you're going to use the imperfect tense. Why? Because there's no clear beginning or end to that action. Also, we have this reference that indicates repeated actions. This wanting was ongoing. Repeatedly, I wanted to drive. It wasn't just one time. Okay? Stop me if it doesn't make sense. And then we have this verb in this context, and what's this saying? I what? Practice driving every single day. So we have this new vocab word, manejar, which is the exact same thing as conducir. You can use either, but you're responsible for knowing both. Practicaba is in what tense? Imperfect, because why? Habitual, right. We know, just by hearing this verb, practicaba, that I did this multiple times or just once? Multiple times, right, because before we take our driver's test, we want to practice and practice and practice. So we want to use the imperfect to convey that repetition. And we also have todos los días, something that further supports that. Okay, and then, antes de tomar el examen, yo estaba lista y un poco nerviosa. So what's this talking about, antes de? Before. This one's tricky, I know. Everybody does that. It's not unique to you. I see it all the time. We think after because it starts with A, but really it's before. What word means after? Después de. Remember, A comes before D in the alphabet. Antes is before. Antes de, we need to use an infinitive. Even though in English it's before taking, in Spanish we say antes de tomar el examen. So I'm referring to all this time up until this moment, and therefore I need to use what tense? Imperfect, right. Because this is how I was feeling. And estaba lista means what? Lista means ready, and nerviosa means nervous. So we're going to add this to this acronym that we're creating. Usually when we have emotion with the verb estar, not always, but most of the time when you have emotion with estar, you're going to use the imperfect. Estaba lista y nerviosa. Those adjectives that describe feelings, typically used with the verb estar, will typically be in the imperfect because they're ongoing, they're descriptions. Okay, otro ejemplo muy importante. Hacía sol, no llovía, era un día bonito. All of these verbs are in what tense? The imperfect, because why? All of them are in the imperfect because we're describing. What are we describing? The weather. The weather. Hacía sol, no llovía, era un día bonito. Descriptions. So often with weather, we use the verb hacer, and when we're just describing that it was sunny or it was cold or windy, viento, frío, calor, sol, we typically use hacer, hacía in the imperfect. Why? Because we're describing. Okay, and here's another one that might have seemed a little bit of a contradiction based on what I said at the beginning. Eran las 4 de la tarde, what's that saying? It was 4 o'clock, which is pretty specific if you ask me. However, what tense is this? Imperfect. This is an exception to the rule. And you even had this in a superside activity in chapter 10. Era, or eran in this case, is the imperfect of ser. So when we have time, we're adding to our acronym here, time. And it's very important to note it's only with the verb ser, only with the verb ser. We'll use the imperfect irregular, era, if it's 1 o'clock, eran, if it's a plural time, like las 4, because it's just a rule. Generally, when we state what time it was 4 o'clock. It only can be with the verb ser, and it must be with las, ocho, cinco, dos, and if it's 1 o'clock, era. So here's 2 super obvious answers on the supersite and on the test. If you have ser plus las in a number, it's going to be eran. If you have tener plus a number in años, it's going to be tenía. So those are two answers right there that are very easy to identify. And then we have el examen empezó. So it was 4 o'clock when what? The test started, right? Empezó is what tense? Preterite. And we're using the preterite why? Empezó means it started. Specific is completed. Usually, y'all, when we have verbs like empezar or terminar, started, ended, the flight took off, the flight landed, those actions, more often than not, are in the preterite because they're completed. There's a clear beginning and end to this action. So most of the time, those verbs are going to be in the preterite because they're completed in the past. Okay. Otro ejemplo. Primero me subí al carro. So here we have some new vocab from chapter 11. Me subí. What does that mean? Got in the car. No. Primero me subí al carro. Después prendí el carro con la llave. En el carro el examinador me preguntó, ¿está lista? Y yo le dije sí y empecé a manejar el carro. All of these verbs that I just went through rápidamente are all in what tense? Imperfecto or pretérito? Pretérito. No, todos. ¿Por qué? Why are all these verbs in the preterite? Almost. You're on the right track. These are a sequence of events. First I did this, then I did that, then I did this. When we list off, boom, 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 what we did, we're going to often use the preterite tense, sequence of events. So, what do you look for when you're doing the supersite or on the test? You want to look for words like primero, luego, después, por último. When you see those sequencing words, that's going to cue the preterite tense. Okay? So when we tell stories in the past tense in English or in Spanish about what we did, first I went to the cake party, then I did tons of cake stands. Later I felt, I got sick, I barfed everywhere, and then I went home. Okay? All of those verbs in Spanish would be in what tense to tell that story? Preterite tense. Pretérito. Exactly. Muy bien. But then if you were like, I was so drunk, you would probably use the imperfect because that would be describing, emphasis on the word describe, how you were feeling. Okay? So we can use these tenses simultaneously even when we have conversations about what we did over the weekend in Español. Okay. Conduje por el centro de la ciudad observando los semáforos y la velocidad. Conduje. First, I want to really point out this verb before we talk about the grammar. What is the infinitive of this verb? It's a chapter vocab word. Conducir. Conducir. And when you see it conjugated, and it's, what tense is this? Conduje? Preterite. When you look at it in its preterite form, it looks a lot like the irregular form of what verb have we seen in the preterite? Really similar. What verb in the preterite from chapter 9 had that J in it? You remember? It has the same ending here. It's a CIR verb. Decir. Muy bien. Excelente. So decir, irregular preterite stem, remember, is D-I-J. Conducir is C-O-N-D-U. J. So if I give you this verb on the test, or if you see it on the supersite, remember, it's just like the verb decir in the preterite, and we're going to build on what we know. Conduje por el centro de la ciudad is saying what? I what? Drove through the, city center, downtown, observando los semáforos y la velocidad. Those are two new vocab words. What was I observing? Semáforos are, what are you not going to do on your driver's test? Yeah, you're not going to speed, and you're not going to run yellow lights or red lights. Stoplights, no? Semáforos, velocidad. And velocidad is easy to remember for speed because it looks like what word in English? Velocity, which is a physics term that relates to speed and things in motion. Okay, but we're using the preterite here because why? Is this something that I did repeatedly or used to do or ongoing? No, this is a specific event that occurred on the day of the driver's test. Do I normally speed? Yes. Did I used to speed? Yes, of course. But not on that driver's test, that one time did action. Okay, here's an example that's like muy importante in terms of using the preterite and imperfect. Yo manejaba. So in the previous slide we had the verb conducir. Conduje, but here I have another verb, manejaba. ¿Cómo se dice manejaba? Or manejar. To drive. So we have two verbs this chapter, conducir, manejar. But this verb now is being used in what tense? The imperfect tense. Manejaba muy bien cuando otro carro me pasó rápidamente, inmediatamente puse los frenos. And now we have two more verbs. In what tense? Preterite. Muy bien. Why is that? What's going on here? When I say yo manejaba muy bien, what am I saying? I was driving. I was driving. In Spanish, whenever, ever, in the past tense, you want to convey the idea of ing, all we have to do is use the imperfect. Manejaba. In this context, uses the imperfect to say was driving. If you want to say you were sleeping, dormía, you were studying, estudiaba, whatever it is you were doing, you're going to use the imperfect. See?
So why did you do that when you said
Observando. Because I didn't have that verb conjugated with a subject, I'm using that as a participle. And I could construct the sentence a little bit differently, which I'm about to show you when you would do that. And to answer your question and relate it to this particular example, which will hopefully make sense as to why it's set up like the way you noticed in the previous example, is that manejaba muy bien cuando. So this cuando means what? Gracias. This cuando means what? What does cuando mean? I was driving well. When? So we have an interrupting word. When we see that cuando, it's like a red flag, flashing light. Use the preterite because now something's going to interrupt that action, which is why we have the preterite. I was driving very well when another car passed me quickly and immediately I slammed on the brakes. Okay? So the verbs after cuando in this particular example are in the preterite. So the way this sentence is set up is different in which the way the other sentence was set up, and we don't even have cuando. When we have something that was going on, I was sleeping when my roommate got home, or I was studying when the fire alarm went off. In those examples, dormía cuando, estudiaba cuando. When my friend got home, that would be the preterite. When the fire alarm went off, that would be the preterite as well, because it's an interrupting action. It's a specific event. And if you look on your paper, this is not the first time you've seen imperfect cuando preterite. Are there any other examples in this story prior to this example where we have imperfect cuando preterite? Any other examples in this story? Will you have that ordered, Jacqueline? Empezó. Muy bien. Eran las 4 de la tarde cuando el examen empezó. Are there any other ones? There might be some more in the story, but let's just take a look at these two. So Notice something consistent with these two actions. We have imperfect cuando preterite. And if anybody who's had me as a professor before has heard this term, which I refer to as a cuando sandwich, which I've coined to help you recognize on the supersite in 100% on your Chapter 11 test. I'm going to give you a verb, I'm going to give you a cuando, and then I'm going to give you another verb. And if you remember this moment right now, you'll get that answer right, as long as you know how to conjugate the verbs. That the first one is imperfect, then cuando, then preterite. Imperfect cuando preterite. Cuando sandwich. And I'll put it down here. Imperfect cuando preterite. It goes in that order. The whole concept of ing, you can connect two ing ideas with mientras, which means while. Like I was studying while she was sleeping. While, that's what that word means. If you see that on the supersite, both of the verbs are going to be in the imperfect. Mientras I was studying while she was sleeping, I was taking notes while she was talking, etc. But the cuando sandwich is used for imperfect cuando preterite, and we can also have what I call a cuando wrap, like we had in our thesis statement at the beginning of our story. Cuando tenía 16 años, yo recibí mi licencia de conducir. So be careful on the supersite and possibly on the test. You could reorganize the order in which you're going to say something, which is going to affect the order of the grammar. We can say, cuando el examen empezó, eran las 4. Cuando el otro carro me pasó rápidamente, yo manejaba muy bien. Ok. Bueno, otro ejemplo. El examinador no estaba contento. Estaba imperfecto o pretérito. Imperfecto. Muy bien. ¿Por qué? Porque contento es un adjetivo que describe exactamente, ¿no? Ok. Por ejemplo, después tuve que hacer la parte más difícil, estacionar el carro en paralelo. Tuve que hacer means what? Tuve que hacer. Tener plus que plus infinitive. Tuve que hacer. Tuve comes from tener. Tener means what? To have. So I had to what? Do the hardest part, which is what? Estacionar el carro en paralelo, which means what? Parallel parking. Now, muy importante in Charleston. But other students have told me in the past when I've presented this that they didn't have to do the parallel parking part on their driver's test. Did anybody not have to do that? I know, there's always somebody. But even if you didn't have to do it, you obviously learned how to do it because you live in Charleston. And it's something you must learn to do. This verb, tuve, está en el pretérito o imperfecto. Pretérito, porque tenemos después una acción específica, pero aquí tenemos otro ejemplo. Antes, importante, antes no tenía problemas estacionar en paralelo, pero aquel día tuve un problema malo. En los dos ejemplos, los dos verbos tienen el verbo tener, ¿no? Tenía imperfecto o pretérito. Tenía es imperfecto, pero tuve es pretérito, ¿no? Why is that? Same verb, tener un problema. We even have the same word after it, problema. Why is one in the imperfect and one in the preterite? It has to do with the meaning. What idea am I trying to convey? Antes no tenía problemas de estacionar en el paralelo. En paralelo. What am I saying? Yeah, before, remember antes means before? No tenía problemas. I what? Didn't have any problems. And I use tenía because I'm indicating one time or habitually. I would parallel park sin problema. No pasa nada. No problemas, right? So I'm going to use tenía. Also, antes is like leading up to this day, prior to this day, which is definitely a reference to repeated actions in the past. But aquel día tuve un problema malo. Aquel día means what? That day. Aquel día, that day, which changes my tense to the preterite. Why? Because is this an ongoing action or a one-time action? One time, exactly. Very specific to that day. So as you can see, we can use the same verb in the same sentence with both tenses. Okay, chicos, yo estacionaba en paralelo cuando choqué con un carro estacionado. This didn't really happen. I'm just trying to use chapter vocab. Estacionaba en paralelo cuando choqué con otro carro estacionado. What's it saying? What do we have here? What should be standing out right now? Cuando estacionaba, choqué, estacionaba, pretérito or imperfecto. Imperfecto, pero choqué, pretérito or imperfecto. Pretérito. So what is this? Cuando sandwich. Why? Because what was I doing? Right. I was parallel parking when what happened? Crashed into another car. Chocar is our infinitive in the yo form in the preterite tense. Remember, CAR verbs change to QUE with an accent, like jugar, jugué, JUGUE, in the yo form, CHOQUE. Okay, cuando inmediatamente el examinador se bajó del carro y examinó el otro carro. So se bajó. ¿Cómo se dice se bajó en inglés? That's a new vocab verb. Se bajó del carro. He got out. Right, exactly. Got out and examined the other car. Pretérito or imperfecto. Pretérito, muy bien, ¿por qué? ¿Por qué es el pretérito? Inmediatamente. ¿Cómo se dice? This is an adverbio de la lección 10. Inmediatamente means what? Immediately. That's definitely a reference of a specific event that occurred in the past. No? I use it again. Inmediatamente. Otra vez. Bad writing. But whatever. Me puse muy nerviosa. What's it saying, really? I what? Me puse es imperfecto or pretérito? Pretérito. El infinitivo es ponerse. Ponerse has lots of uses in Spanish. We know poner is irregular in the preterite tense. We saw that in chapter 9, which is why it's PUSE. But we have this me, which changes the meaning from to put to become. Or I got. This conveys the idea of I got nervous. A reaction to something that happened. Like I got scared as soon as I went in that haunted house. Or I got, discouraged when I got my test back. Or something like that. I became. So even though we have this adjective, nerviosa, we're not using the imperfect like we saw in this example. Because in this example we have estar. And we're just describing how we were feeling. But in this example, we're using the verb ponerse after inmediatamente to say that we got nervous, a reaction, which is why we use the preterite. Does that make sense? It's a little different. Okay, pero él me dijo, está bien, era la cuneta. La cuneta is the curb. So really I hit the curb, but actually this didn't happen. I'm just trying to use vocab. Actually, I didn't do well on my driver's test when I parallel parked because I didn't put my hand behind the the passenger seat. And you're supposed to use your mirrors, but also turn around. Same thing happened to you? Yeah, I almost failed the driver's test. But you know what? Who cares what score you get? All you want is that license, so whatever. Me dijo. Dijo, we just talked about this verb. What is this verb? Said, exactly. So, imperfecto or pretérito? Pretérito. Why? Because he said to me this particular thing, so specific. We even put it in quotes. It's that specific. And remember, decir is irregular in the preterite, just like I pointed out. Conducir has that J. Same with decir, CIR verbs. Can we use the imperfect tense with the verb decir? Of course. If we want to convey the idea of used to say, like my grandmother used to always say, or my father used to always say, decía, used to say versus said. Does that make sense? Or even in class. I remember in Spanish class in Spain, somebody was saying something, somebody interrupted them, and the professor went back to the student. What were you saying? What were you saying? We can use the imperfect. ¿Qué decías? ¿Qué decías, Eliza? What were you saying? We can use the imperfect with decir that way. But when we have something specific that someone said, we're going to use that irregular. Me dijo. Okay, entonces, él se subió al carro. So here's the example with the other vocab verb. We had se bajó, but now we're saying instead of getting out, he, what? What does se subió? Got in the car. Subió al carro. Escribió algo. Sequence of events. Perito. Me dio el examen. Saqué, sacar. Chocar, choqué. Sacar, saqué. La forma de yo. 70% en el examen. Recibí mi licencia. No? Pretérito, pretérito, pretérito. Why? Why are all these verbs in the preterite? Sequence of events. Boom, boom, boom. This happened, this happened, this happened. Sequence of events. Don't forget. CAR verbs, yo form, preterite tense, QUE. And then this is the last thing that we're going to conclude with today. On Thursday, we're going to actually apply and practice and do it ourselves. But this is really important to note, so make sure you don't pack up yet, because you're going to want to include this in your notes, because this is an answer on the test. You're going to use this in your ampliación. You're going to see this on the super site. So this is going to result in gaining more points. Fue una experiencia de suspensa, pero buena is saying what? What am I saying here? This is the last statement of the story. This is the conclusion, right? Yeah, it was a suspenseful but good experience, right? Summary of an event. On your test, and I'm telling you right now, it's even recorded. I'm going to give you an answer. When we have fue or fueron, like mis vacaciones, fue plus an adjective, we're going to use the preterite to summarize. But remember, we could use that plural. If our subject is mis vacaciones, we need to use fueron. Mis vacaciones fueron terribles. Or, el examen fue difícil. On your chapter 10, ampliación paragraph, most of us, not everybody, but most of us had that summary statement. Mi enfermedad no fue muy grave. And I wanted you to use this summary statement so that you would get it right on the super site, get it right on the test, and overall, more importantly, understand it. When you conclude, summary statement, pretérito,